morning everyone, we're going to be doing some expressive animal ink work. I'm going to start off with the monotone hippos and then move on to full colour for the chameleon. I've sent you the reference images. You can most welcome to use those or any of the others that I've sent through from Pixels. They're all royalty free, so you can have loads of creative fun and not worry about it too much on copyright. Now I've drawn this already. If you want to draw it during class, that's absolutely fine. It's just I've had a nasty head cold and I thought if I didn't sit there in bed and sleep and draw it quickly, you probably wouldn't end up with a video this week. So obviously you can draw during class and it's pretty easy. You're kind of getting two triangles, as you can see here, and then you start bulking out the head, bringing in the top of the skull and really looking at the exaggeration of the jawline. Obviously use that line of symmetry running through the nose because you can see the angles that both these heads sit at, and then look at plotting in your eyes and your nose levels, looking at if you've got any slight angles. Keep your drawing simple and linear and rub out any errors or any marks. So if you've got any little pencil marks, use your putty rubber. I've worked on cartridge paper. You can work on cartridge paper or you can work on watercolour paper. It's completely up to you. The smoother the paper, the better with inks. Anything that's got a slight texture to it, it attracts more pigment and you don't get quite a nice flow of colour. It's completely up to you. Have a play around and see what you want to do. You're going to need some different inks. Now to start off with, I'm just going to be using the black to get used to the technique. Show you how. You could, if you wanted to, add a little bit of white if you've got white to create some tones of grey, or we can just use water to dilute it down. And then for the chameleon, which is going to be the second project, as you can see here, I've got some nice red and some yellow, which is quite bright, and I got a really nice bright blue. So this is, because I know everyone's going to ask me, flame red, lemon yellow, and cyan processed cyan blue. Now you might have extra colours, like I've got this green here. If you've got the green and you want to have a go, you can do. This is just a light green, but it looks pretty good for fun and quirkiness. I might do, I might not. I'm going to mix them and see how they come out on the palette. You're therefore going to need a water pot, as you can see there. You're going to need a palette. It's handy if you've got a palette with sections in, as you can see here, and a selection of brushes. Now all my brushes are nothing special. They're all synthetic hair. You want a nice soft hair for ink. And I've got a little bit of paper just to lean on should I need to work it. I don't want to lean and mark my drawing. Now to start off with, let's get going on the monotone to warm you up and give you a feeling of how to work this technique. So if I put my reference image over here for you to have a look at, you can see the thought process. My reference image just below. I've got a bottle of black ink. This is Winsor & Newton. I'm going to first of all grab a paintbrush. So I've got one here that's quite good because it's a big size. Always shake your ink with the lid on thoroughly, obviously, unless you want to splatter yourself. Then I'm going to take a little bit of ink and put it in my tray, just like so. This is going to be an expressive art project, so it's very loose, very fun and very quirky. Now my brush has already got some ink on it, so I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to wash my brush and then I'm going to add the water. Then I'm going to take the water I've just added and add some more water. It's really dilute. It looks like quite a strong ink. Now if I'm in doubt and want to just check what it looks like, I might have a look on the corner. I can already see that that's too strong for what I want. I want it even more mild. So I'm going to have to probably get some fresh water because I think it's just too strong. So let's get some fresh water and make sure it dilutes to a very pale grey tone. It's the aim of the game. Right, I'm back and I take a little bit of that and I'm just diluting it down. That looks better. That looks more like what I'm getting. I'm going to dilute it even further. Now I've got a little bit of tissue just to mop up my paper. And to start off with, I want this picture to be quite loose and free. I'm going to take this light colour and I'm going to use a brush and I'm going to go over my lines. Now I'm trying to be a little bit careful around the mouth, so I can see there's a little bit mouth. I'm going to take a little bit off using tissue, but you'll still see the brush marks. Okay. And I'm going to add a little bit more water to that. And you can see I'm holding the brush towards the end and generally scribbling all over it. Throw in a little bit more water and I'm going to take a little bit off over the head. Okay, I'm going to take some off over here. I got bits of the paper poking through. I'm not even by any point. And I'm going to bring some down here. Okay, and take some off around the mouth so it's a little bit lighter. And you should end up with something like that. So it looks just generally like we scribbled a load of lines over it. Okay. Then I'm going to come back with my slightly darker tone and I'm going to flick. So you can see here, I'm loading the brush with a slightly darker tone and I'm flicking some fun bits over there. It's a little bit darker than I want it to go. I'm going to take that off with a tissue, but you can still see even if you take it off, you get the dotting. Okay, now I'm going to wash my brush and I need to let this dry. So I can let it dry naturally or I can give it a quick blow dry with a hairdryer. I'm going to obviously go with the hairdryer because it's nice and quick, and then I move on to the next stage. So I'm upping my tone each time to get a stronger, darker, crisper detail. Obviously it's going to get harder with colour, but let's start off with a monotone and warm you all up. Okay, so let's quickly dry. Okay, so it's dried a bit. It's not hugely dry because you can still see the paper's a little bit warping, but that doesn't matter. I'm going to take another brush and I'm going to work down my slightly darker shade. So let's just put a little, yeah, it's a little bit, you can see the darker tone here. Okay, and then I got my water. So I'm going to start working up, because I'm right-handed, I'll work left to right. If you're left-handed, you'll probably want to go the other way. You still want to keep your brush marks fairly loose. So think about where you're holding the handle towards this end. Oh, I'm going to add a little bit more water. And I want you to get that darker tone down in as swift a brush mark as you can. So you can see these shadows. Think about how hard you're holding the brush and how much of the brush you sweep around. Okay. It's not about being perfect. It's about building up a very loose tonal insinuation. You're not a camera taking a photo. You're a human being. And if you've got a big area, so down here, really I probably should have been going for a slightly bigger brush mark. So I should have upped my brush, but you know, it gives you the idea. Keeping it very simple, very loose. And I'm using the whole of the head of the brush sometimes. So it's about how you're holding the brush and how much you're pressing down. And flick, be bold and courageous. This one's a bit bigger to the right of me, the hippo's head. So I'm going to take a bigger brush. Oh, it's a little bit too dark for my liking, so I'm adding a little bit of water, swinging that in, and I'm going to use a tissue just to blot up the excess. I maybe gone a little bit too dark too quick. Okay, I think I'll probably come back here as well because I just fancy a little bit more of a looser, bigger brush mark. Now it's good to have a brush that's got a slight point to the end. It's easy to control and to get the marks. Obviously with a bigger brush you might want one to have your hand right towards the end. It depends on how close you are to your artwork and you know how big your desk is ultimately. In there. I want this up here. I'm gonna go over like that. Now, got a little bit of shadow underneath. Like so. I'm gonna take the tissue and swam off some of that where I want that lighter tone to be. And you can see that you're getting very oriental feeling brush marks. Obviously change the size of the brush depending on what types of marks you want to generate. Don't overwork it. You want to leave some of this first layer we did poking through. Increase a little bit more pigment in there so you could feed in while it's wet a little bit more pigment along certain parts if you feel it's very dark. And that's where my pigment is neat, so you can see that if I put the pigment in neat, see that blade? Now because the paper's wet I can move it along. You can use bleed to create lovely patinations, so don't be afraid of them, just take it easy. Now for the bleed you would need the paper to be wet, so you can see that I'm wetting the paper and I'm feeding in the pigment. Okay, I'm going to feed in a little bit around there because it's really dark as well. I probably want a few darker splodges here and there. Remember, this is expressive, it's about being very loose. Okay. Just like that. Increase darker tone in there. And bring it up there. Okay, so again, you need to let this dry. If you want any areas where you'll find out you got really crisp line, and you might like the crisp lines, don't get rid of them too early because you might find that you quite like the crisp lines. Or you can dab in and you get a crisp line but you get a little bit of a mottled texture, which you might like. Remember, it's about playing around and taking risks with this. So you get to feel what you like and what you don't like when you finish the artwork. Remember, I'm actually going to go in with a little bit more of a dark splat, so I've got some dark pigment on my small brush and I'm going to just splat that as well. And when you're splatting, make sure obviously your table's covered in newspaper, you're splatting away from yourself because ink's really good at staining clothes. The closer you are to the paper, the finer the splats will be. So it depends on what type of work you want. And you see here, I'm going to just throw some up there. Okay, it's going to look a bit mad and crazy at this stage, but don't worry too much. Our work always looks mad and crazy at this stage, so hey, you should be used to it by now. Then this needs to dry again, so you can blast with a hairdryer, you can put it in the sunlight if you're somewhere nice and warm, for instance, and it is a blue sky today. A little bit out there, UV light will dry it super quick. So I'll fast forward now to the next stage. So you can see here, It's still a bit wet, but I'm just going to go for it because I know time is getting tight. So I'm going to get my brush, and I've got my neat bit of ink. It's basically a bit of ink with only a little bit of water. I've got a nice pointed head brush, and now I'm going to start working my drawing. So again, I'll work from my left to my right. Okay, and this is all about really confident brush marks. Try and do things in long, smooth sweeps. Okay, and you can see I'm kind of basically going over my drawing. I very light loose dry brushing. There you go, you've got your 2 hippos. So let's move on to the next one now. We're going to be using the same technique, building up, but we've got colours. So you're going to need to clean out your palette, make sure that's ready to go. And I'm going to be using my primary colours with a bit of black ink. Okay, and make sure your water, of course, is nice and clean with your brushes.